It was a masterpiece. I'm not talking about a painting or a symphony. I'm talking about the fire I had just built in my fireplace. It was a Jenga meets Lincoln Logs triumph of seasoned oak, with a tight core of birch for that quick, satisfying catch. The flames were a perfect deep orange. The crackle was a solid 8-10 on the cozy scale, and I was exactly 45 seconds away from sinking into the worn groove of my leather couch for a 12-hour Cyberpunk 2077 session. A local craft IPA was sweating condensation onto a coaster at my elbow. This, right here, was the suburban American dream. And then I heard it. Thwack, 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 thwack. It wasn't a knock. It was an indictment. It was the kind of rapid-fire, high-tension rapping that doesn't say, "Howdy, neighbor, got a cup of sugar?" It says, "I've measured your lawn with a laser, and it's 0.2 inches non-compliant with Sycamore Creek Homeowners Association Bylaw 14C. I let out a sigh so heavy it probably registered on the Richter scale. I knew exactly who it was. There was only one person on planet Earth who could knock with that much self-righteous fury. Karen. I hit pause on the game's title screen, hauled myself off the couch, and padded to the door, my socks sliding on the hardwood. I cracked it open, composing my face into what I hoped was neutral annoyance, but probably looked more like constipated confusion. There she was, in all her glory. Karen, my next-door neighbor. She was dressed in her full battle regalia. A neon-pink athleisure set that looked more expensive than my car, a white visor pulled down so low it was practically a welder's mask, and, of course, the clipboard. She was never without the clipboard. It was her Excalibur. "David," she said. Her voice was as sharp and thin as a razor blade. She always used my full name. To her, Dave was probably a gateway drug to leaving your garbage cans out past 6 p.m. "Karen," I replied, leaning against the doorframe. "What a surprise? Everything okay? Did Mr. Fluffles escape his designated 10-foot leisure square again? Because I swear, that rabbit has a death wish and my tomato plants are innocent." She ignored my snark, her eyes fixed on a point just above my head, as if she was staring at a structural integrity problem in my roof. "Your emissions," she said. I blinked. "My emissions? Karen, I drive a Prius. My emissions are practically wildflowers and baby laughter. I'm single-handedly saving the polar bears over here." "Not your vehicle, David." She took a sharp, theatrical breath, as if preparing to list off my war crimes. "Your chimney emissions. The smoke." I followed her gaze. I glanced back at my fireplace, my perfect, beautiful, crackling fire, and then looked up toward my roof. "The smoke," I repeated, tasting the word. It felt insane. "Correct." She tapped her pen on the clipboard. Click, click, click. "It is. It's too puffy." I just stared at her. The world tilted a little. The sound of the crackling fire in the living room seemed to dim. A bird chirped somewhere, blissfully unaware of the sheer, concentrated absurdity unfolding on my porch. "Puffy." I said it flat. It wasn't a question. It was a diagnosis. "Yes, Puffy." She said it like it was a moral failing. "It's ostentatious. It's voluminous. It's drifting directly into my airspace, which, by the way, I have a clear and unobstructed view of from my new second-floor yoga studio. And it is unpleasantly puffy. It's blocking the ambient light. It's an eyesore." I genuinely had no idea what to say. This was uncharted territory. I'd dealt with her complaints about my mailbox. The shade of red was too aggressive. My recycling, the audible clinking of my beer bottles, was disruptive to the neighborhood's sound profile. And of course, the infamous lawn gnome incident of 2023. He was, apparently, loitering. But Puffy smoke? Karen, I said, trying to find a foothold of logic in this quicksand of crazy. It's smoke from a fire. It's just what it does. It's the physical result of combustion. It's science. It can't not be Puffy. Nonsense, she sniffed. My cousin in Oregon has a wood-burning stove, and his smoke is perfectly streamlined. It's thin. It's respectful. Yours, she gestured wildly at the sky, is a nuisance. So, what? What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. How, Karen, does one depuff smoke? Do you want me to put my chimney on a diet? Get a smoke spinning class? Should I climb up there and tell it to be less ostentatious? I am not a chimney technician, David, she snapped, as if that was the ridiculous part. That is your problem. I am simply informing you that you are in violation of Section 8, Article 4 of the HOA Guidelines. Nuisances. Your puffiness is a nuisance, and if you don't find a way to fix it, the board will be hearing about this. I have already started a file. She tapped the clipboard one last time. It was a punctuation mark, a threat. And with that, she pivoted on her $300 running shoes and marched back across her perfectly manicured, chemically green lawn, disappearing into her beige and gray McMansion. I stood there on the porch for a long, long time. The chill air felt good. I looked up. A lazy white cloud of smoke was drifting from my chimney. It was just smoke. It wasn't angry smoke. It wasn't aggressive smoke. It was just smoke, doing its smoky thing. It wasn't too puffy. It was, if anything, the platonic ideal of chimney smoke. I went back inside and slammed the door. My beer was warm. My cyberpunk session was ruined. My perfect fire was now a beacon of suburban spite. Too puffy, I muttered to myself, staring into the flames. I grabbed my laptop. It wasn't Puffy, I whispered to my dog, Buster, who just thumped his tail. It was smoky, like smoke is supposed to be. I sat on the couch, laptop open, but I didn't load the game. I just stewed. But now, I said, cracking my knuckles, it was personal. For the next 2 days, I was obsessed. Too puffy echoed in my head like a bad pop song. It was the first thing I thought of when I woke up and the last thing I thought of when I fell asleep. I'd be in a Zoom meeting for my IT job, and my boss would be like, "Dave, we need to optimize the data flow for the Q3 server migration." And all I could think was, but is the data flow too puffy? I couldn't let it go. It was the sheer, breathtaking audacity of it, the arrogance, to look at an elemental force of nature and say, I don't like its shape. My first instinct was compliance, or the appearance of it. I went down a Google rabbit hole that was both hilarious and deeply concerning. How to make fireplace smoke less puffy chimney smoke diet plan, non-puffy wood for sale, aerodynamics of wood smoke, how to depuff smoke. The last one just returned thousands of results on how to quit vaping. Not helpful. I learned about chimney liners, flue temperatures, and something called the stack effect. Apparently, cold air can make smoke seem puffier. I briefly considered sending Karen a high school physics textbook with a note attached. "It's not me, it's the 34-degree ambient air temperature, you witch." But no, that was her game. That was clipboard-level warfare. I needed to go bigger. I needed to respond to her absurdity with weaponized absurdity. I was stirring a pot of chili on Tuesday night, staring out the kitchen window at her house. Her yoga studio light was on, a smug, kale, smoothie-colored glow in the dusk. She wants to complain about the shape of my smoke, I muttered. Fine. I'll give her a shape. An idea began to form. It was a stupid idea. A childish, expensive, and logistically nightmarish idea. It was perfect. What's the opposite of a puffy, aggressive nuisance cloud? What's the most non-confrontational, universally beloved shape in human history? Oh, I said, a slow grin spreading across my face. Oh, yes. I wasn't just going to make rings. That was for amateur vapors and wizards. I was going to make hearts. I'm a senior IT systems architect. I don't just build things. I over-engineer them. I'm not a welder, but I understand fluid dynamics and programmable logic controllers. I knew this wasn't just a matter of putting a cookie cutter on the flue. This would require hardware. I dumped my chili into a bowl and went to my computer. I wasn't Googling how to depuff anymore. I was Googling theatrical fog machine components, custom solenoid valve arrays, and vortex generator schematics. I would rig a system. It would inject a harmless, non-toxic, food-grade steam, a mix of glycol and water, just like a fog machine at a high school play, into a custom-built aperture on top of my chimney. This aperture would have a series of high-speed solenoid valves that would pulse the steam, creating a perfect, stable vortex. A heart-shaped vortex. They would be delicate, loving, passive-aggressive hearts. Harmless, theatrically inclined, non-puffy hearts. The next morning, I made my first call. "Stamper & Sons HVAC, a gravelly voice answered. "We'll fix your air. This is Gary." "Hi, Gary," I said, trying to sound as normal as possible. "My name is Dave. I live over in Sycamore Creek. I have it's a unique request for a chimney modification." "All right," Gary sighed. He sounded like he'd been smoking since the womb. "You need a new flue liner? A spark arrestor? Got a raccoon in there?" "No, nothing like that," I said, looking at my complex diagrams. I need a theatrical-grade vortex generator with a custom-milled heart-shaped aperture wired to a high-pressure, non-flammable steam glycol injector system. It needs to be remote-controlled, preferably via a smartphone app. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. I think he might have put his cigar down. "Sir," Gary said slowly, "this is an HVAC company. We do furnaces. We do ducts. We don't do sci-fi or whatever that was." "Look, I know this sounds weird," I pleaded, but my neighbor complained that my chimney smoke was too puffy. I just want to modify the output to make it less puffy and more heart-shaped. Another beat of silence. It was even longer this time. "Too puffy," Gary repeated, his voice flat with a lifetime of homeowner-generated despair. "Her exact words," I confirmed. A deep, wheezing sigh came through the phone. It was the sigh of a man who had seen a homeowner try to fix a gas line with duct tape. "You know what?" he said. "I'm going to transfer you to our custom fabrication department. Ask for Mike. Mike's weird. He did a job for a guy out in Chesterfield who wanted his entire central air unit to look like a steampunk dragon that breathed steam. Mike's your guy." The line clicked. "Custom Fab, Mike speaking." This voice was different, sharper, less tired, more intense. I repeated my entire, insane request. The vortex generator, the glycol injector, the heart-shaped aperture, the smartphone app. When I finished, there was no sigh, just a single, appreciative grunt. "Your neighbor," Mike said. "Too Puffy?" "That's the one," I said. "Huh. You're on Sycamore Creek, you said? What's the address?" I told him. "You're next door to 412, he stated. "Yeah, that's Karen's house. You know her?" A slow, dry chuckle crackled over the phone. "My ex-wife's sister lives 2 streets over. Her name is Karen. Is your Karen the one who tried to get the mailman fired for walking too aggressively on her lawn?" "Holy crap," I said. "That's her. That was last spring." "I knew it," Mike said, his voice full of sudden, beautiful energy. "Listen, Mr. Dave. This is the dumbest, most glorious, most beautiful thing I have ever been asked to build in my 25 years of custom metal work." "So, you can do it?" "Oh, I can do it," he cackled. "It's going to be a pain in the ass. I'm going to have to source a custom solenoid valve array from a company in LA that usually builds fog machines for Avengers movies. The aperture's going to have to be laser cut from T316 stainless steel so it doesn't corrode. The control unit will have to be custom coated." He paused. "It's going to cost you a lot. Like new transmission for a Mercedes money." I looked out the window. Karen was out there, inspecting her mailbox, probably measuring the distance from the curb with a tape measure. "Mike," I said, pulling out my credit card. "Some things are priceless." "Attaboy," he said. "I'll be there tomorrow at 8 to take measurements. We'll mark the invoice as Emergency Flue Maintenance and Efficiency Upgrade. HOA will never know the difference." For the next 2 weeks, my house was a hub of clandestine activity. Mike and his team, 2 guys named Skeeter and Paul, who looked like they moonlighted as roadies for Metallica, were on my roof. They were loud, but they were professionally loud, making all the right, routine maintenance sounds. Lots of banging. Lots of, "Yep, this whole flue's gotta be relined." Karen watched them from her yoga window. I could see her silhouette. She looked smug. She thought she'd won. She thought I was paying thousands of dollars to become less puffy. Mike installed the system. It was a masterpiece of spite engineering. A sleek, black, stainless steel box, barely visible from the street, was now permanently affixed to the top of my chimney. A thin, insulated line ran down the back of the house to my garage, where a 5-gallon pressurized drum of theatrical love juice, as Mike had labeled it, was installed. He handed me the final piece, a custom-built app on my phone. It was simple. A black screen with a single red button. "All right, the Puffer 5000 is live," Mike said, wiping grease off his hands. He looked prouder than a new father. "The fire in your fireplace just acts as the trigger. The heat sensor in the flue activates the system, so it only works when you've got a real fire going. Authenticity, right? Now, I gave you 2 settings." He showed me. You could tap the red button for gentle love, 1 heart every 30 seconds. Or, you press and hold, Mike grinned, and you get Care Bear Stare. It's a rapid-fire 5-pulse barrage. I'd start slow, kid. See how she likes gentle love first. He packed up his tools, gave me a salute, and left. That night the air was perfect, cold, clear, and still. A perfect Saturday, just like the one that had started this whole war. I built my fire, the same fire, the masterpiece of oak and birch. I let it heat up. I waited until I saw the first normal, puffy wisps of smoke rise past my window. I pulled out my phone. My heart was pounding. "Here goes nothing," I whispered. I tapped the button for gentle love. I didn't wait to see it from the window. I ran out the back door onto my deck, clutching my phone like a remote detonator. My beer sat forgotten on the kitchen counter. I looked up. For the first few seconds, nothing. Just the normal, lazy, puffy column of white smoke rising into the deep blue of the twilight sky. My heart sank. Did Mike's weird science fail? Was this whole thing just a multi-$1,000 mistake? And then, it happened. Thump. It was a sound. A deep, soft, satisfying thump, like a giant dropping a pillow. A normal wisp of smoke came out, and then, right behind it, a perfect 6-foot-wide, brilliantly white heart-shaped smoke ring pulsed out of my chimney. It was majestic. It wasn't smoke. It was cleaner. It was pressurized steam, sharp and defined. It held its shape perfectly. It rose, tumbling gently in the air, a flawless cartoon heart floating against the sky. It was like God's own vape trick. It drifted for a good 15 seconds, slowly expanding, before the evening breeze finally caught it and tore it into a shapeless, harmless cloud. I laughed. A real, belly-shaking, slightly maniacal laugh. Thwomp! There was another one, right on schedule. 30 seconds later, another perfect white heart, soaring skyward. I watched it drift. It was beautiful. And it was drifting. Directly over Karen's meticulously manicured, $1,000 Japanese meditation garden. I was so busy admiring my handiwork that I almost missed the second-floor window of her house sliding open. It was the yoga studio. The window opened so fast it sounded like a guillotine. A shriek pierced the air. It was a sound of such pure, unadulterated outrage that I'm surprised it didn't shatter glass. "What is that?" A moment later, her back door slammed open so hard it rattled against the house. Karen stormed out onto her deck. She was still in athleisure, this time a truly offensive shade of lime green. Her phone was already in her hand, recording. "David!" she screamed, stabbing her finger at the sky, where another heart was just beginning its journey. "What are you doing?" I took a casual sip from the beer I'd finally remembered to grab. I leaned against my deck railing, projecting what I hoped was an aura of complete, baffled innocence. "Evening, Karen," I called over. "Just enjoying the fire?" Do not play dumb with me," she screeched. "Your chimney, it's leaking, shapes." "Oh, that," I said, as if just noticing. I pointed up. "You like it?" "I was worried, after your feedback. I took your note to heart. The smoke, it was too puffy." "You were right. You were so right. So I had a guy come out. This is the new system. Is this better? I was worried the last batch was too amorphous. These are much more defined, don't you think?" She just sputtered. Her mouth opened and closed. She was trying to find a word, a regulation, anything. You, she stammered. "You are polluting the sky. You're making emoticon pollution." Emoticon pollution. That's a new one, Karen. Gotta write that down, I said, taking another swig. "And don't worry, it's totally eco-friendly. It's just water vapor and a little food-grade glycol. Harmless. It's probably cleaner than the aerosol you use on your hair. I've got the datasheets from the manufacturer if you want to see them. I can laminate them for you?" This broke her. The attempt at compliance was something her brain simply couldn't process. This wasn't in the HOA bylaws. This wasn't in her script. "This is targeted harassment, David!" she roared. The yoga calm was gone. This was pure, primal Karen. Harassment! I am calling the police! I am calling the EPA! I'm calling the governor! You do that! I shouted back, feeling a surge of pure, joyful spite. You tell them! I'm sending my love! And as she fumbled with her phone, wildly trying to dial 911 with a shaking finger, I raised my own. I pressed my thumb down on the black screen. I held it. And you know what? I yelled. I'm sending a lot of love. I unleashed the Care Bear stare. The effect was instantaneous. My chimney, which had been gently fwoomping every 30 seconds, suddenly went berserk. Fwump, 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 fwump! A rapid-fire barrage of a dozen hearts blasted out of the chimney, one after another, creating a massive ascending column of love-themed steam. They shot into the sky, a glorious white-on-blue stampede of affection. Karen just stood there, phone to her ear, mouth agape, as the cloud of hearts drifted over her deck and dissolved. All over her. A gentle, harmless, completely non-toxic mist of my victory settled onto her visor. My neighbor, he's shooting hearts at me, she shrieked into the phone. Send everyone! Send the army! I went back inside, whistling. I sat on my couch. My fire was crackling. My beer was cold. And for the first time in a week, I finally felt relaxed. I was, however, going to need more glycol. The red and blue lights arrived in under 10 minutes. I guess shooting hearts gets a faster response time than a cat stuck in a tree. I was waiting on the porch. I'd turned off the Care Bear stare, but left gentle love running. A single, placid heart fwoomped into the night sky every 30 seconds. You know, for atmosphere. 2 cops got out of the cruiser. One was older, with a mustache that had seen things and a weary, lumbering walk. His name tag read Miller. The other was young, sharp, and looked like he was desperately trying to maintain a professional demeanor. His tag read Sanchez. Karen was in her front yard, vibrating with rage, her phone still out. He's over there, officers. He's the one. He's committing chimney warfare. Officer Miller sighed. It was the same sigh I'd heard from Gary the HVAC guy. The universal sigh of the American service worker who has to deal with the public. Evening, sir, Miller said, walking up my driveway. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. He looked at me, then looked up at my chimney. A heart fwoomped out as if on cue, a perfect punctuation mark. Sanchez, behind him, saw it. His mouth twitched. He coughed into his fist. Sir, Miller said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. We got a call about unusual smoke. From your chimney, in the shape of hearts. That's right, officer, I said politely. I'd rehearsed this. My neighbor, Karen over there, she filed a formal complaint with me a few days ago. Said my original smoke was too puffy. I was just trying to be compliant. Took her feedback, hired a contractor, and got a new system installed. Is this one less puffy? I think it is. Sanchez turned his back, pretending to look at the street. His shoulders were shaking. He's mocking me, Karen screamed from her lawn. It's harassment! It's a blatant display! Arrest him! Arrest him for visual assault! Visual assault, Miller repeated, his voice dead. He looked at me. Sir, is the heart smoke toxic? Is it a fire hazard? Is it landing on her property? Nope, not at all, officer, I said, full of bright, helpful energy. It's a food-grade glycol and water vapor solution, just like a fog machine. It's non-toxic, non-flammable, and evaporates completely in about 30 seconds. I can show you the invoice from Artisan Metalworks and HVAC. It's a fully permitted custom installation. I even have the fluid's material safety data sheet. Want a copy? I laminated one for Karen, but she didn't seem to want it. Officer Miller stared at me. I stared back, smiling helpfully. A heart whoomped above our heads. Sanchez let out a small, strangled snort. Miller finally closed his eyes for a second. Sir, there is no city ordinance against puffy smoke, and there is no city ordinance against heart-shaped smoke. As long as it's not a public hazard, not making excessive noise, and not landing on her property as a solid, we can't do anything. It's just vapor, I confirmed. It just dissolves. Right. He turned to Karen, his voice now taking on the official tone. Ma'am, please go back inside. It's not a criminal matter. There is no visual assault statute. But puffiness, she sputtered. Ma'am, Miller said, his patience snapping by a millimeter. Please stop calling 911 unless there is an actual physical emergency. Heart-shaped steam is not an emergency. They turned and walked back to their car. Karen stood there, defeated, as they drove away. As they passed my house, I saw Officer Sanchez in the passenger seat, finally letting go, laughing so hard he had to wipe his eyes. I gave a little wave and went back inside. The war, however, was far from over. Defeated by the police, Karen escalated. The next morning, every resident of Sycamore Creek got an email. Subject: Urgent, emergency HOA meeting. Public nuisance. The email, written in all caps, with various sections bolded and highlighted in red and yellow, summoned us to the community clubhouse that night. I, of course, baked cookies, oatmeal raisin. The clubhouse was packed. Karen had managed to whip up enough hysteria to get a full house. I took a seat in the back row and set my Tupperware of cookies on the refreshment table next to the tub of lukewarm Country Time lemonade. Karen was at the front, laptop hooked up to a projector. She was pacing. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice quivering with a performer's rage. Our community is under attack. She clicked to the first slide. It was a blurry, zoomed-in photo of my chimney. As many of you know, she said, I have been in a dispute with my neighbor, David. She pointed at me in the back row. I smiled and held up a cookie. A dispute regarding his emissions. She clicked again. A new slide. The Chimney Menace, a war on property values. For 2 weeks, she declared, I have been subjected to a campaign of targeted, emotional graffiti. She then launched into a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation. It was a masterpiece of suburban paranoia. She had slides with diagrams showing the puff drift of the hearts over her property. She had a slide with a blurry photo of me on my deck, circled in red with the label The Agitator. She had a slide that just said the word dignity in 72-point bleeding red Comic Sans. This blatant display of chimney-based aggression, she concluded, is a direct violation of our community's soul. It lowers our property values. It makes us a laughingstock. It must be stopped. She slammed her hand on the table. Questions? An awkward silence filled the room. People looked at their feet. They looked at me. They looked at the cookies. Finally, Brenda from down the street, a nice lady with 3 kids and a very tired-looking minivan, raised her hand. Karen? Brenda said, her voice small. I actually think it's kind of cute. My kids love it. They wait for it. They call him the Love Puffer. A few people tittered. The Love Puffer. I liked that. I was going to keep that. Karen's face went white. It is not cute, Brenda. It's a nuisance. I don't know, Karen, chimed in Gary, the guy from 2 doors down whose RV was a constant source of HOA complaints. Honestly, it's a lot less annoying than your 6 a.m. power weeding sessions. That electric weed whacker of yours sounds like a dying banshee. Wakes me up every Saturday. My weeding is essential to maintain the aesthetic, Karen shrieked. And what about your motion sensor floodlight? Someone else yelled. It's aimed right at my bedroom window. It goes off every time a squirrel farts. That light is for security, unlike your dog Mark, which barks at the Amazon Prime truck 7 times a day. In less than 3 minutes, the entire meeting dissolved into a complete and total suburban brawl. It wasn't about my chimney anymore. It was about everything. It was about Gary's RV and Mark's barking dog and Brenda's kids leaving their bikes on the sidewalk and the Johnsons' aggressively beige house paint. It was glorious. I just sat in the back, eating a cookie. Amidst the chaos, I slipped out the back door. The Hart chimney was forgotten, lost in a sea of petty grievances. But the final nail in Karen's coffin wasn't the police or the HOA. It was Brenda's 14-year-old daughter, Chloe. She had, of course, filmed the whole thing. The fwoomping hearts, Karen screeching, the emoticon pollution line, the arrival of the cops. She'd put it all on TikTok, set to the cheesy flute part of My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion. By the next morning, it had 500,000 views. By the evening, it was on the local news. Which is how, on Wednesday night, I found myself standing in my front yard under a fwoomping heart, being interviewed by a very perky reporter from Channel 6 News named Cindy. So, Dave, Cindy said, holding the microphone up, your neighbor says this is targeted harassment. What do you say? The camera was on me. I gave it my most sincere, deadpan look. Cindy, I'm just a man who believes in a cohesive neighborhood aesthetic, I said, my voice full of earnestness. My neighbor, Karen, a valued member of our community, brought a concern to my attention. A very serious concern. My chimney smoke was, and I quote, too puffy. I paused, letting that sink in. I just took her feedback to heart, I said. As if summoned by an ancient god, a perfect heart fwumped out of the chimney directly over my shoulder. Literally, I added. Cindy lost it. She snorted live on air, trying to turn it into a cough. The segment was a massive hit. I was the love puffer. I was the chimney Romeo. I was the man who fought the HOA with love. My passive-aggressive victory was total. I had won the police, I had won the neighborhood, and I had won the local media. Karen's house went dark. Her blinds stayed shut. She didn't come out. For 2 full weeks, there was silence, a beautiful, heart-fwoomping silence. But I knew. You don't get to be that kind of Karen by accepting defeat. She wasn't beaten. She was reloading. The piece was, in a word, suspicious. Karen had gone completely dark. No clipboard, no visor, no passive-aggressive notes tucked under my windshield wiper. Her lawn was still perfect, but it was being serviced by a professional crew now, not by her with her banshee whistle weed whacker. It was eerie. I knew in my bones, this wasn't over. This was the quiet part of the storm. The tipping point, I figured, would be the upcoming Neighborhood of the Year judging. It was Karen's Super Bowl. She was the head of the Community Beautification Committee, a committee of 1, and had been preparing for this for months. A viral clown chimney, as she'd called it in her failed HOA meeting, would not be part of her vision of suburban perfection. She was going to make a move. And it wasn't going to be a strongly worded letter. I called Mike. "Mike," I said. "It's Dave, the love puffer." "Hey, kid," he laughed. "Saw you on the news. You looked good." Took her feedback to heart. "That was beautiful, man. Poetic." "Thanks. Listen, I think she's planning something. She's too quiet. And the neighborhood of the year thing is this weekend." "Say no more," Mike said. "You're paranoid. I like that. You need security." "What are you thinking? A fence?" "Nah, I'm thinking an upgrade. I've got a spare high-res night vision wise cam in the truck. I'll mount it on the chimney stack itself, aimed right at the Puffer 5000's control box. And I'll run a line for an outdoor speaker too, just in case." "In case of what?" "In case," Mike said, "you need to talk to her." He came by the next day, marked it as Phase 2 of Efficiency Upgrade, and in an hour I had a 24/7 high-definition feed of my Chimney's apparatus, viewable on my phone. And then I waited. The alert came at 3:17 a.m. on Saturday morning, the day of the judging. My phone, on my nightstand, buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. Chimney cam. I rolled over, my heart suddenly hammering. I fumbled for the phone, my eyes bleary. I tapped the notification and the live feed opened. And there she was, Karen, dressed head to toe in a black market-looking black catsuit. She had a black ski mask on. She looked like a 5'4" suburban ninja who had lost a bet. And she was on my roof. She had a small, collapsible ladder against the side of the house and was army crawling across the shingles toward the chimney. In her hand, she was holding a can of... oh no. It was great stuff, expanding spray foam. "Holy," I whispered. She was going to foam my flue. She was going to fill the entire Puffer 5000 apparatus, and by extension, my entire chimney, with a concrete, hard, flammable, expanding polyurethane foam. This wasn't petty anymore. This was a felony. This was arson, practically. If I'd lit a fire, the whole house would have gone up. The Puff War just got real. My first instinct was to call the cops. Let Miller and Sanchez handle it. But where was the fun in that? This was theater. She had chosen her costume. I had to choose mine. I crept out of bed, went to my office, and sat at my desk. I pulled up the camera feed on my main monitor. She was at the chimney now, shaking the can. She was shaking the can. I unmuted the microphone. I looked at the controls Mike had installed. He hadn't just given me the app. He'd given me a full admin panel on my PC. It included the audio output. And I saw a new unlabeled button. It just had a emoji on it. Mike had called it Mike's Special, for emergencies only. This felt like an emergency. I let her get the nozzle right up to the aperture of the puffer. 5,000. She was muttering to herself. "Puffy. I'll give you Puffy." I took a deep breath. I hit the switch for my backyard floodlights. The entire roof and my backyard was suddenly lit up like a prison break movie. Karen shrieked, a high-pitched, terrified sound, and dropped the can of foam. It clattered down the shingles and splashed into her koi pond. Then I hit the speaker button. "Really, Karen?" My voice boomed across the entire neighborhood, echoing like the voice of a very disappointed God. "A felony? Seems a bit much for Puffy Smoke, don't you think?" She froze. She looked around wildly, blinded by the light, ski mask askew. She looked like a raccoon caught in a garbage can. "David, you're a menace!" she shrieked back, her voice muffled by the mask. "You've ruined everything. The judges are coming." "I ruined everything?" I boomed. "Karen, You tried to have my oak tree cut down because its leaves were aggressively autumnal. You called the city because my garbage cans were too pungent. This is war, she screamed, trying to scramble backward off the roof. No, Karen, I said, my voice dropping to a calm, terrifying rumble. I hovered my mouse over the button. This is the grand finale. I clicked it. For a second, nothing. Then a deep whirr sound started, much louder than the usual thwoomp. The Puffer 5000 was powering up to 110%, and then it unleashed. It wasn't gentle love. It wasn't the Care Bear stare. Mike had outdone himself. He had created the apocalypse of love. The machine didn't just thwoomp. It roared. A massive pressurized cloud of steam shot out, enveloping her. But it wasn't just hearts. It was a barrage of everything. Hearts, smiley faces, a few thumbs ups. And then, oh, Mike, you beautiful, beautiful genius. A stream of perfectly formed, 6-foot-wide, steam-based middle fingers. And as if this wasn't enough, Mike's final touch kicked in. The speaker system, which I thought was just for my voice, suddenly blasted at full volume the opening chords of Also Sprach Zarathustra, the theme from 2001, A Space Odyssey, Dunnen, Dunnen, Dunnen. So the scene, 3:17 a.m. My house is lit up. A middle-aged woman in a catsuit is trapped on my roof. A symphony is blasting, and my chimney is shooting a rapid-fire barrage of hearts, smileys, and obscene gestures into the night sky. Karen was sputtering, blinded, and now completely damp from the Harmless steam. She tried to stand, slipped on the wet shingles, and slid butt first down the roof, finally landing with a thud in her own, very expensive Japanese maple tree. She was stuck. It was at that exact moment that the red and blue lights flashed at the end of the street. I'd called them the second I saw her on the ladder. I'm petty, not stupid. Officer Miller and Officer Sanchez pulled up. They got out of the car. They didn't even speak. They just looked. They looked at the house. They looked at the chimney, still puffing a triumphant smiley face. They looked at the fog-drenched maple tree. And they looked at Karen, hanging from a branch by her catsuit, her ski mask pulled half off. Dun, 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 went the theme song. Miller looked at Sanchez. Sanchez looked at Miller. Miller looked up at the sky, as if praying for deliverance. He slowly, deliberately reached up and turned off his body cam. You know what, Sanchez? He said, his voice a gravelly monotone of pure defeat. I'm putting in for a transfer. I'm going to traffic. I'm done. So, turns out the police and the HOA board take trespassing with intent to commit felony vandalism and/or arson very, very seriously. Even more seriously than puffy smoke. Karen was charged. She wasn't going to jail. Her husband was some high-powered lawyer who managed to plead it down. But it wasn't pretty. Probation, a massive fine, court-mandated community service, which, hilariously, involved picking up trash on the highway. And the final crushing blow. She was banned, for life, from ever serving on the HOA board again. The neighborhood of the year judging was, predictably, a disaster. The judges arrived at 9 a.m. to find a fire truck, 2 police cars. Miller and Sanchez were still writing the most insane report of their careers, and a damp, irate Karen being helped out of a tree. We didn't win Neighborhood of the Year. However, thanks to the second viral TikTok, this one set to the mission, impossible theme, the judges were so baffled and amused by the entire story that they created a brand new one-time-only award for Sycamore Creek. Most unique community. We got a plaque and everything. I hung it in my garage. My chimney was now a local landmark. The Love Puffer was famous. People on the local news forum called me a folk hero. Teenagers would come by on weekends, hoping I'd do the finger one. I never did. That was for emergencies only. Mike, the contractor, sent me a Christmas card. It was a picture of him and his crew giving a thumbs up. Inside, he'd written a quote. "Turkeys for Thanksgiving. Just think about it, M." I was considering it. Life settled into a new, weird normal. Weeks went by. The leaves turned. The air got colder. It was quiet. Then, one Saturday afternoon, a perfect, crisp, chilly Saturday, I was in my backyard, stacking wood. I was going to build a fire. A real one. I heard a noise. Snip, snip. I looked over the fence. Karen was in her yard. She was on her hands and knees, quietly, glumly, weeding her garden. She looked smaller. The visor was gone. The athleisure had been replaced by a simple, drab pair of overalls. She was serving her probation one dandelion at a time. She saw me. She froze. Her eyes were full of a weary, bottomless dread. She was probably worried I was going to call her probation officer because her weeding was too aggressive. I paused. I was holding a log of oak. I was about to go inside, light the fire, and then activate the system. Gentle love had become my default, but I stopped. And I looked at her. "Hey, Karen!" I called over. She flinched. She slowly looked up, her face a mask of exhausted defeat. "What, David?" It wasn't a question. It was a surrender. "Just about to light the fire," I said, holding up the log. "Got a preference?" She just stared at me. "I mean, I can do the hearts. That's gentle love. Or, I could just not." I patted the side of my house, where the bypass switch was. I could just stick to the original. Karen stayed on her knees, looking at me. She looked at my chimney. She looked at her perfect, stupid, prize-winning garden. I could see the gears turning. She was processing this. An olive branch. A smoke signal. A long, long minute passed. A tiny, defeated sigh escaped her. "Just make it normal," she whispered. I cupped my ear. "What's that?" Didn't catch it. She gritted her teeth. Her eyes squeezed shut. She said it louder, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Normal. Please, just normal smoke." I couldn't help it. I had to. "Normal?" I asked, feigning confusion. "You mean Puffy?" I saw her hands clench into fists, crushing a fistful of crabgrass. She was fighting 1,000 demons, and she lost. "Yes, David," she hissed through her teeth. "Fine, whatever. Make it Puffy." I smiled. A real, actual, non-snarky smile. "You got it, neighbor." I went to the control box on the side of the house and flipped the main system bypass switch. The Puffer 5000 went dormant. I went inside. I built my fire. The same masterpiece of oak and birch. I lit it, and it caught beautifully. I grabbed a beer, sat on my couch, and hit play on my game. After a few minutes, I got up. I walked to the living room window. I looked out, past my yard, past Karen's yard, up into the cold, clear Saturday sky. A beautiful, normal, undefined, glorious plume of perfectly, wonderfully, and obnoxiously puffy smoke was rising from my chimney. The war was over. The Puff had won.